Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's always great to see more and more women that are at these conferences, but it's even better to see the men that come out here to listen to this session and help us all talk about what's happening in games with the emergence of more and more female players and people that are making games. So I'm actually going to let these ladies introduce themselves. Tell me just more about you, your career in games, and what you are currently playing the most and why you're playing it.
Hi, everyone. Did you eat all right? Everybody okay? Good. So I'm Sabrina. I work at King, so very nice to meet you. I come from Brazil. I've been working with games for about 8 years. I lived in 6 different countries working with games, and I finally moved to London like 3 months ago, so it's pretty fresh to me. I still enjoy the occasional fish and chips, and they say that that's going to end, but I hope not. I am actually, so it depends, right? I play on the console. I started God of War, so I think that's yeah, I can keep hearing Kratos say boy all the time now. So, and on the phone, I could say I'm playing Candy Crush, but that would be a lie, actually. I've been playing Farm Heroes, look at that, the other one. So, yeah, that's me. I hope you enjoy the panel today.
Hi, also from my side, thanks for coming after lunch. So I made a PhD in computer science. I'm a researcher and a teacher at Graz University Technology at the moment in Austria. So I have 1 hour of jet lag, forgive me that. And I started working in the QA department at Electronic Arts. So I also have experience in the industry. I used to develop virtual reality environments already pretty long time ago at MIT. So I moved around quite a lot. And I'm pretty interested in playing a lot of different games. So a couple of years ago, I started a project which is called The Year of Playing the World, where I try to find and play games from all the different countries of the world. So that's my dedication at the moment towards games and trying to play as diverse as we could also eventually develop. And I play PUBG as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kate. I worked at Product Madness. It's one of the biggest social casino applications. I started more than 6 years ago in San Francisco, and I was doing live ops stuff, so user journey, life cycles, promotional events, that kind of stuff. And then 2 years ago, I moved to London to take on a product manager role for Heart of Vegas on mobile. Been enjoying it, and then recently I became a product director for a new project, which I cannot talk about, but maybe next year. I'm not the biggest of the gamers, but I really do like puzzle games, and that's kind of the genre that is very popular among the women. My favorite game would be Gardenscapes and Homescapes. I think those are really, really great games. They take a concept that was there before with Candy Crush and just like have a really cool twist on it, which made it, perform amazingly well. And it just takes my mind off of it, which is why we all play games, really. So.
Perfect. I, too, am playing Gardenscapes right now. Austin and I are doing really well. So to go to the question, what does voice mean to each of you? And this is in regards to, do you think of your own voice in this industry, or do you think of the voice of your players, or does voice mean even something different from that?
Okay, so for me, I think this question has a lot of angles. I can start about product, and we can talk about that, how important it is to listen to your players and your user base. We have a really big user base, so we are in constant communication with them. We get their feedback, we do events, we invite players and things like that to keep our games fresh and interesting. As someone that works with games and have, like I said, I lived in 6 countries, right? So I lived in Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Germany, Sweden, and now in the UK. I learned so much about working with so many different people, so my voice as a lead producer evolved. You learn about working with them, different cultures, different styles of working, and different methodologies in different sizes of companies. So it also changes kind of like you adapt to how you work. And as a female coming from a Latin American country in which it's a very male-centered society, I actually didn't think that I had a voice at all. Like I had my managers and my male bosses, and there was no voice for me. So I only learned to use that voice after I left, and quite recently, to be honest. So for me, like, what does voice mean? It's so important personally, because it's about finding it as well in an industry that it's so hard for us. So it impacts from me personally as a professional and as a person, then how I interact with the teams that I lead, to how do I interact with the consumers that play our products.
So from my side, I mean, coming from the university, I did study computer science, and there were a lot of female professors. And I am trying to sort of change that and be myself one female voice in the computer science education. So this is definitely something what I would call a voice, trying to find not only in development and also in the player the voices, but also the ones trying to bring the knowledge to the people and try to bring new aspects to that. But also through this project I just talked about, this a year of playing the world, where I try to play different games, I found that some of the strongest voices, nevertheless, whether it's female or not female, you can also find in smaller games where you try to find games from different regions. Like you just mentioned, it's very interesting to hear to those voices also closer within the games. So basically, when you play games, that you find the voices who were telling stories through the games. And definitely also for my students, like I want my students to be voices that are heard, especially the female students, because we don't have so many in computer science. It's very important to hear and listen what they want to talk about and eventually develop.
So I think in my experience, I've only worked on an established product, so I never had to come up with a new product idea. So in my career, the new concepts, new features were to do with an established product, Heart of Vegas. And so I think when it comes to voice, in my mind, it's kind of finding that overlap between the voice of the brand, which has been crucially important, because Heart of Vegas is a well-established kind of marquee title for our company. So for us, it's making sure that we maintain that Heart of Vegas voice, but also understanding what our players are all about. Because if you look at the social casino industry, you have kind of pockets of where the games fall into, and it's been changing over time. And there's more overlap in terms of features and meta and all that, but understanding where your user base belongs and doing the research and surveys and kind of knowing what they care about, what interests them. So that's been my experience. And also to add to my voice as a female, I fortunately have never been in an environment where I felt repressed. And I think it has to do a lot with the company that I've worked for. And at Product Madness, we have lots of females that are managers, that's leading teams. So I think in my experience, it's been very, very positive from that standpoint.
Very happy for you.
Yes, that is great to hear. So Johanna, you touched on this a little bit, but I'm very, very interested to know more about the female voices of your students, and what insights can you share about what is important to them considering new game design and development?
So again, coming from this computer science background, I've learned that as a female computer scientist, especially in the early years, the younger male students would eventually think that you might be not as good as them. That's true, that's what I've experienced myself as well when I was studying back then. But that is very easy to change. That is, like, from my perspective, that's also what I've learned. It's very easy to change if you have a good performance as a female student. And it is shown statistically and through research that girls are as good at coding as boys are. And so we just need to prove them. And the best way to prove this is actually to show off this coding skills also in small group projects. So that's what we are trying to enforce, to build groups, coding groups or game development groups, which always also involve a female part within the group. And that's very appreciated, and very early on the other students would also learn that it's not a matter of the sex, or it's not related to the coding skills at all. And I believe the same for game development. There are so many games out there which were designed from males, for males basically, because no females were at all in the entire team back then. But this is changing, so also the games are changing, and that's what I'm like learning also when I'm playing a game. I immediately sort of like get a feeling whether or not this was developed by a very not diverse team. And for me, diversity is not only involving male or female, but also there's so many more aspects to that we need to consider. And in our courses, really try to make the students aware of this need for diversity. That's, by the way, also one of the reasons why I happen to be here in London right now. I'm coming from Austria, and we always take, once a year, we take like about 15 of our students to London to meet students from a different university with a different research and also programming background, so it's game design students. And they're able to work together in those diverse teams from the different countries, from different cultures, and that's important. Not only female, male, but also trying to find, like, expose them to the different cultures, to different ideas, and that's what I feel should be more enforced also in education. And I hope we're doing that. I feel it's right. What I see as a result are also more interesting and diverse games in our game projects. That's what I can see for myself as a main result and contribution.
You've been in university for quite some time of your career. What is the ratio right now for your students?
Oh, it's changing quite a lot. We've been between 10 to 20%, but it's computer science students in the computer science faculty. In Europe, I feel it's even less compared to America, and in computer science, it's even less compared to game design programs. So in computer science, we're still struggling, which many don't know that, but one of the first programmers, or the first programmer ever, was a woman back then, Ada Lovelace. So we've always been very, very good and on top. And it's not that, I don't feel that people don't understand that we're good in programming. It's just that often this idea of what is programming or what is game development is not really taught very well, very early. So people don't really get the idea of those activities. So I think this should be changed very, very early, like already in school. When, for example, like I always imagine like small girls playing like small, cute little games, which they really like, and then based on this idea of, oh, I want to be as creative as well as those guys develop those games. I want to do this as well, and that's why I feel also giving the possibility to young children very early to play games, to get motivated and engaged with this activity is very important. That's why I started computer science. I started playing Prince of Persia back then on a DOS machine. I was not able to read or write yet, but I knew what buttons I need to press on the keyboard to start the game. And I wanted to create such worlds as well. And that's how I started the computer science program, because I wanted to create my own worlds. And I think people need to get this idea that we can do this, especially with game development.
I agree. Sabrina, you have actually worked on a variety of different game genres during your career. Do you feel that your voice changes or has changed in the development and or live operations of different games? Or do you feel that you personally have remained constant in your views?
It has absolutely changed. So, yeah, I started working in an indie studio, and it was kind of something new. I created my own indie company back in Brazil, and it was all about do or die. So the voice was pretty much do or die. So we have to get this game out. We have to get the next thing. We were working insane hours, but we loved what we did. We were very happy. But then I thought that there were not many opportunities, and I wanted to mature how I worked and as a professional, and I wanted to learn a bit more. So I worked at Square Enix for some time, and I learned all about Asian free-to-play mobile games, and it changes the way you see a product, right? I've developed console games, and I've developed RPGs, and now I work with casual, obviously. And it changes, I think, from a number of perspectives. First, in how you develop, the methodology you use. I know the buzzwords of agile and blah, 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 but it's all about how diverse your team is. Like now, King is such a big company that I have the luxury of working with people from around the world, and speaking just one kind of, having just one tone of voice won't cut. So we have women, we have people from all over the world, and it doesn't matter. We have different backgrounds, we have different experiences, and if you keep the constant, like how we did it back in Brazil, it just wouldn't work, right? So it evolves like that, and being a lead producer means that I have teams, and I have different people that depend on a lot of how the direction that I stir them on. And not only that, I think for me as well, the challenge changed. From going to an indie to now working at King, the level of ambition is completely different on what we're trying to achieve. So that also adds up to the voice that we're adding. So, and of course, that comes with perks of more resources. So I get much more information. And I think that's the base, right, for successful development and successful teams. It's communication. So it's all about talking all the time, constantly, and listening. Because I think you can come and I'm here and you're talking, you're all listening to me, but there's got to be another avenue in which you all talk and I listen to you. And I think that adapts to, maybe not all at once, okay? But I think that adapts to how you grow as a professional and then to the product that you're doing. And that's the thing that I feel like it needs to be constant. You need to know exactly what you're building and who you're building it for so that you're able to deliver something that's successful. So I feel like now that is something that I learned. When do you keep straight command and like, okay, so this is what we're going to do, and where do you actually adapt?
So Kate, you actually started your career in games, in marketing, CRM, monetization. What do you think has been your biggest takeaway from that experience as you moved into your product manager, product director position? And do you feel that you are more connected to the user behavior with that experience?
Yeah, definitely. So, as you know, in products, the cycles are so long. In a year, you get to release 1, 2, maybe 4 features if you have a big development team. But in live ops, you do different iterations and different tests all the time. So I had this privilege and this amazing opportunity to launch testing different price points, configurations, colors, buttons, wording, whatever it is. And so, in a year, as a product manager, I would release, like I said, very few features. But as a live ops manager, I ran 50 A/B tests. And so through that, you really get to learn what works, what doesn't, what people respond to. And then in a pretty short time, you get this incredible experience that has really helped me to transition very well into product. And also through that, you learn how to formulate hypotheses, how to set up proper tests, what it is you're looking in a test, how many variables you should have. So I think that was a very crucial experience for me being a product manager right now, or product director.
So kind of staying along the lines of those findings or that data, I found a study from a few years ago that showed that female players playing female-preferred or gender-neutral games actually spent more on in-app purchases, spent more time playing, and actually had higher retention after day 7. Do you still feel that this is the case for those games? And do you feel that any one of those measurements is more significant than others in considering their lifetime value?
I can jump. Okay, so she did send me the link before, so I read that article. But to be honest, my personal opinion, right? So this is me, Sabrina talking. It makes sense, right? So if you localize a product to a certain area, study shows, the number shows, that they will consume it more and they will feel more engaged and your retention is going to grow and everything else, right? So if there is a target audience that you want, it only makes sense that you would create games for that. So I'm not surprised that female audience pays more and identify more and retain more in games in which they either have the female gender character there or something related or gender neutral. It doesn't mean that men or women are not interested in different kind of genres. That's not what I'm saying. But it says that it does make sense that it's consistent if its culture is also consistent from that part. I work at King, so the vast majority of our players are females. And I would say that they pay. We make some money, and they retain. We have some players, but it's interesting to see that it's so important for you to know that. For us, I'm in the trench line of creating new games, right? So my job is to create the next whatever game, insert name here, that's going to be successful. So for me, the day-to-day work is basically understanding who do we have, who do we don't, how do we get there, or do we even want to go there? And that means talking to players. That means sending demos or sending prototypes for them to play and watching them play. That means understanding what they read, write, what do they consume, what are they watching, what are they listening to, what does it make sense. That means why do they play Gardenscapes and why do they play this and what's the connection between this. So that means understanding, and the female audience is growing so much. I mean, you can read that anywhere. And I think at King, we don't take that for granted. I'm not trying to advertise, but I'm just saying that in my personal experience, that never happened before. Like, I have the luxury of teaming up with creative directors that are women, because we're going to make games, there are going to be the majority of women players. So nobody else better than us that consume, play, make those games. So I think, and again, I had a very different experience than you. It was mostly me, as the only woman in the meeting room, as the only woman as a producer in the whole studio. So this is a luxury that I'm so happy to have, but that I don't take it lightly, because I do think that that's why there's part of the success, is because we actually put the people that identify or that are part of that behind. And the games are so massively appealing because the team is made of, I don't know, 20 people, 17 different nationalities, because that is super important for us to understand and not approach things just from one avenue. It can be chaotic, but it can be super enriching to have a meeting with people that are from all over the world trying to speak English. Like, it's not my first language either, right? So it is already challenging for you to get out there and to try to express your point of view and try to agree, nonetheless, about different cultures, nonetheless, about different genders. So you have to be able to reach the player into that sense. And then if you succeed, the result that you have is exactly that. A user base that is faithful, that pays, that's committed, and that actually gives you feedback, right? I mean, I'm sure that many of you listen to your players because they do reach out proactively with suggestions or improvements or sometimes compliments. And we do host top players in our studio. So here in London, we have the Farm Hero franchise, and we invite them to come over, and they play, they sit down with the development team, and they say, oh, I really like this live op of this, what about that? And of course, that's why we're professionals. We have our best judgment to know what makes sense to put it in the game and what doesn't. But I think having a vast majority of female players, or a lot of female players that pay, it's super important to put someone else that they identify themselves with to talk to as well, to reach out.
So, Kate, in the casino or social casino genre, you're saying that right now that you've had the luxury of working with a gender diverse group, but traditionally casino and casino games have been male-dominated development. Are you finding that this is growing for more product directors like yourself, or do you feel like you have a different view when you're now creating even just these features for these games?
So I'm the only female on my team, just to clarify. There are female leaders in our company, which is very refreshing, and we have graphic designers that are females. I just want to go back to the first question, the previous question. When it comes to design that's more female-oriented or neutral, I mean, I think we need to go back to the fact that women that are paying are probably not in my age category. They're, 45 plus, and that's something that we see in social casino, right? They're older women. And let's be honest, if you open an app that looks very masculine, you kind of associate it with a meta game and features being very complex. And if I install an app and it's super masculine, I'm like, I probably won't even figure out what to do. And I am experiencing that. So I think what we've been seeing lately in free-to-play is that these complex, male-oriented features, for example, from Asia, are making their way into casual, but they're being repackaged and made very palatable to the female. So if you're asking me, is it gonna impact the LTV? Absolutely, because you're taking a proven feature that works, and then you are making it work for females just in a way where you can consume it and you understand how it works. Yeah.
Okay. So more recently, Google Play had initiated a study that said 64% of women versus 38% of men prefer mobile over any other gaming platform. With this unprecedented number of women playing mobile games, do each of you believe that there's enough variety in the new game development to capitalize on this audience? If women make up 50% or more of the audience, is the category of female games too broad?
I think it's a good question. I'm going to try to twist it a bit. So every time I talk, not every time, but most times I'm walking around and someone comes to me, oh, hey, Candy Crush. I'm like, yes, I never worked in that game, but sure. And they're like, oh, yeah, easy puzzle, super casual, yeah, very casual audience. I'm like, have you tried playing level 1,000, 1,200? I mean, that's not casual for me at all. You can see, I can't do that, to be honest. I think I stopped around 200 because I don't really like the puzzle of that. It's very hard for me, okay? You can judge, fine. I like to shoot things in the head. But maybe some passion problem here. But the thing is, I think it evolves, right? And every audience is evolving, including the female. So now, the conversation about making games is not just about, oh yeah, casual games are easy and they're for women, so it's gonna be super simple. We cannot really put much because they can handle. And to be honest, what we've seen with our games is that we're actually making things super hard, and they are consuming content like crazy. So many people over level 2,000, and so many people are devouring the puzzles. And we have a variety of blockers, a variety of boards. If you play Soda, it's like it keeps changing. And it's complex. And I think that's the secret of it. The audience is maturing as well. And we can see a rise on the complexity of how the games are. There are more free-to-play features coming from Asia and making their ways here. Like some years ago, if you talk about putting a gacha system in a casual game, people were like, oh my God, she has no idea what she's talking about. Nowadays, I mean, it's there already. It's there, it's simple, we understand, we mature with it. It's not only the tech, right? The phones get more powerful, now we can do more things. Oh my God, maybe AR, look at all that. It's about the audience as well. They are getting more, I don't know the word in English, proficiency, yes, that. They get more proficient in games. So my mom, she can play Candy Crush or she can play anything else better than me. And I was surprised that I came home. I haven't been in Brazil for some time, and I went home and she was playing Clash of Clans, and I was like, oh my God, okay. And she was with my dad in this clan, and they were super into it. And I was like, what? What is this? And I never thought that that could happen, right? And it migrates not only on the phone to console, and they're playing Last of Us, and I'm like, what? I didn't finish that game because I was scared. But still, like, it matures with it. And so the genre and the variety and the types and mechanics that we're offering, they're much more. And you can talk about PUBG or Fortnite, that they have a lot, there's a big variety there as well, and there's a lot of women playing it as well, and it doesn't mean that it's because it's a shooter, it's super hard for us. It's just that we are maturing with it, and I think that we developers only win with that. We have more opportunities to explore and to disrupt the industry like never before. So we should be strong and take advantage, but at the same time understand that if you look at this audience, maybe it's biased, but there's a lot of women here too, And there's a lot of women more and more in conferences and development, and that makes me super happy, right? Because it started with me being the second person in the history of my country to work with games in the female gender. The second. And I'm not that old, I'm not that young either, but it's not like, so it's something that it makes me super happy to see, and it makes me super happy to see that the audience is maturing as well. They are taking more and more risks in new games. Let's talk about Homescapes and Gardenscapes a bit, right? Which is, I'm sure a lot of people played it, and it's a fantastic game. And I played it quite a lot as well. And we now, there's narrative embedded, there's decoration embedded, there's a lot of things there. There's Austin, and there's the dog, and of course you want to play the levels for the dog, it's the dog. And you don't depend more on a saga map. We know that after 26 comes 27. But we don't need to show that to the players anymore. Now it's about a different connection. And if you think about the audience, if you were pitching a game some years ago and saying, oh, I'm going to put the narrative in, and people are going to be emotionally attached to the dog, and they're going to pay. Executives will be like, okay, come here, I'll give you a hug, now leave. And that's exactly what happens. And that happens because the audience is ready for that. That happens because we have a lot of women playing as well. There's a different intelligence to it. We approach things differently. It doesn't mean that the puzzle's not challenging. Yes, it is. Same blockers, same puzzles. I've seen that kind of puzzle. I'm very familiar with it. But that's the deal, right? We can add more elements, and it doesn't feel like it's taxing. It doesn't feel like something hard for the players. And I mean, it just, as you can see their numbers, they're pretty successful. And they're great games, super polished. And it works. I mean, who would have thought that an old guy still living with the parents would be okay? It's like, and it's okay. So my view is that the variety of genres in the game is just a positive thing for us. And hopefully soon enough, there's not going to be such difference, right?
So, Johanna, you are teaching the next generation of game makers and developers. Where do you think they're going with game development? What are you feeling or seeing with this new generation that they want to see in their games?
What I do see, it's getting more and more diverse. I mean, like as you mentioned, we have so many genres out there right now, so many we are not really aware of yet. There are so many things happening. The games are becoming more challenging, they're becoming more easy. The variety is growing, and I feel like as the students are playing all those different games, they sort of get new ideas of what they could mix. And so sort of new ideas and genres emerge. And I believe that as we put them in diverse teams together in the very early stage as well, it's becoming more creative as well. And what I've learned, again, through this a year of playing the World project, I mean, if I looked into smaller games, like indie games developed within the different countries, it's always very strong voices within the countries telling concepts and stories from their own cultures and from, like in the movies, like in the indie movies back then. And it's more personal stories. It's more stories also from my students, stories they would like to tell and share. And I think games will become more personal also in the future, like smaller stories, maybe shorter games, and very personal ones. And that's what I'm looking forward to, and that's what I do love about games right at the moment, because they're changing constantly, and they're developing, and they're becoming more diverse. I see that.
So, Kate, as a leader in your company, how do you feel that social casino is keeping up with some of these other genres that are having the impact on the female audience, the larger female audience?
So social casino is predominantly female, and they are the ones who pay. We actually have seen something that's a bit reversed. So there have been competitors that have been coming up with these new concepts that 5 years ago would be completely kind of wacky, and everyone would be like, no, females don't want this, because that's kind of who you build for. And then companies, like Morka, games like Huge, they would be experimenting with new concepts that actually males react to. And so now they were able to unlock new segments that play social casino apps, but they are now male, and they're still female payers predominantly, but now they were able to attract this new segment of people. That's very interesting.
I just want to jump into that because I agree completely, right? And the whole, if you think about it, the social casino, right, predominantly female. And I was in a conference a couple years ago, and we were talking about social in casual games. I have a mid-core background, right? So I started at Square Enix, so it was highly Asian card battle games, PvP and everything else. But we were talking about the impact of social and I was trying to prove a point that social and interactions is something that attract women, a lot of women players, and it's vastly known that that just happens, right? And I had this lovely person that was saying, no, I don't think so. Women don't like to interact, right? They just stay home and they just do their thing. I mean, mostly with kids. So maybe if they interact with their kids, the game would be social. But I don't think they want to collaborate or compete at all. So as you know, where I'm from, I immediately turned like red. And I was like, excuse me, what? But the whole conversation and the whole point, it just proves everything you're saying. So I just wanted to add that it makes me super happy to see that that's exactly what happens. And more, games are becoming social. We can talk about Peak Games that has Toy Blast and Toon Blast, right? And in Toon Blast, they did something amazing, which they included guilds. Who would have thought that guilds would be in a casual game? Who would have thought that a clicker, right, would have guild system that is highly profitable? And it's super hard to get in the top 100 guilds because they demand levels and they're locked and everything else. And what is the majority of the audience? You guessed it. So it's just interesting to see how these things happen and assumptions that we have in the past and how this paradigms are broken and how the audience matures. So I just wanted to say I'm super happy with your point. I completely agree.
So going with the whole idea of social and females preferring social, we've seen this explosion of popularity of mobile games in China for female gamers, younger female gamers. One game specifically, I read, earning around $40,000 a day through their user-based purchases. Girls aren't known to be as diehard loyal as boys were with consoles, but they are really effective in those social communities. And I think if they can get a couple of things that they really like, they're more apt to share it. So how have you been really relating to your communities and using that metric of virality or organic kind of exposure?
So for us, unfortunately, we haven't been able to get social thing going. Even though social gaming, it's really you go and you play on your own. And only lately we've started adding some features that's a tournament and you can see a leaderboard. But other than that, it's kind of solitary experience. We do have Facebook pages and we do run surveys to understand what our users care about. So specifically, an example that I can bring up would be our player voice, which is a monthly thing that we run in our company, and it's based on surveys as well as analyzing customer support tickets, Google Play reviews, and we group them and analyze them in terms of, do we have people who speak positively about us, what's our score, as well as looking at what features people request. So that's kind of the main way for us to hear what people want to see in our games.
I think communities are super important, right? I touched a bunch of times here saying that we talk to our players quite a lot, but it is interesting on what motivates them. Because until some time ago, my view on that is that coming from the mid-core is just more that, oh, you have to create that buzz, you're going to have a very active community, and you want them to be talking and getting the guilds and having their WhatsApp line groups, whatever, and the peer pressure, everything, right? But who would have thought, now 2 years at King, that people in casual are also very vocal about puzzles and about everything, and virality is super tricky to measure and it's super tricky to put it. Like, I remember in a previous company, one of my bosses said, oh, we have to make this game super viral. So can you come up with a presentation on how are you going to do that? And I was like, yes, of course, wait. Here's the answer. I mean, how would you predict about what the time you're going to launch that's still going to be viral and things like that? And what is it? Is it influencers? What is it? But there's nothing more viral than you going into the now tube. It's not Subway for me anymore. Now it's the tube. But you see people playing the game, right? You sit down and you see someone is playing the same game as you play, and you're like, oh, what level is that? And oh, okay. And then I mean, I literally saw on a flight, I sat down and someone was playing Candy Crush, and I was like, okay. And then you have those 3 seats, right? The person next to them, they didn't know each other. The person took the phone and started playing. One was jelly, the other was soda, and I was like, all right, there you go. But communities are super important, and talking to them and feeding them content is super important. So we run a lot of campaigns that have impact in the game. And of course, Candy Crush is super huge, and I don't know if you know, we had a TV show about it. Does anyone know about that? Has anyone seen that here besides me? You've seen it? It's very American audience center. So where I come from, we don't have those things. But for me, it was a crazy experience to see it. So we used to watch at lunchtime. Have you ever seen it?
The nicest thing I can say is that I've seen it.
Okay. And it's insane because our second-day retention went up. The game is 5 years old. Second-day retention went up. Unique new users. So viral, of course, this is an extreme example, but virality is where you never think you would be, right? So it's important to do these events, and maybe the answer sometimes is outside the app itself. It's how you interact, and it's what you feed them. We are also part of Activision Blizzard. I know that they're not, predominantly mobile, but just the fact that Overwatch releases those snippets and those videos that talk about the characters and those stories and follow up, that's just for the community. I mean, of course, it's great to know more about the characters that you play with, but it doesn't really change your strategy when you're playing, right? But it's just about getting the community there, getting the interaction, and that's super important for virality, and it impacts all your metrics, right? It's the word of mouth.
You guys have been great at giving so much information about what your games are currently doing and your thoughts, and just bringing your tech background into this as well, Johanna. A little bit off topic, but to come back to the voice. So when I think about female voice and technology, the first thing I think of is Siri and Alexa and those counterparts. So what do you guys think about the female AI assistants? And do you think it is more harmful or helpful in kind of getting through these outdated gender stereotypes?
Who here has a male voice in their Siri? So that makes 4 of us. The reason why I have a male voice in Siri is just because I didn't want to have a female assistant. And that's just a personal grudge. As you can see, I'm starting to twitch, right? It's a personal grudge because I get it, right? Maybe women are taken as more trustworthy or calmer, use better words, but to be honest, it makes no difference, right? It shouldn't make a difference. I have Alexa at home, and I love her, she's great. But the fact that now you can call her computer makes it a little better, because it's also the name, right? It's also a woman, and what does that mean, that we're always the assistant? I mean, for me, it makes me a little bit annoyed. But I didn't think about it, though, when it came out first. When Siri came out, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's amazing, yay! And I never thought about it until you were able to change the voice and the accent as well, right? So now I have an Englishman, because I need to learn to understand what they say. Super hard sometimes for me, the accent. But I just wanted to no, I don't accept it. But I don't know if any of you actually thought about why is it not a man. And there isn't the answer is, it's better to have a female voice as assistant. And sometimes if you have this AI software and there's a male voice, it's because they want to show you leadership and assertiveness. So come have a meeting with me and let me know if I cannot be assertive to you, and we can discuss that. But it's just, I don't know, I think we just take for granted some things that have been the way they have for a very long time, and we just don't question that. And we are developers. We have to question that. We have to crush the norm. Who said that there has to be like this? Is there a different perspective? And I just thought about that just working with different people, with different cultures and they question things differently. Like I work with many Asians and Russians, I learned so much from them because it is so different, right? So we take so many things for granted, just like with the voice assistant. So yeah, that's my rant.
What are the students thinking about AI?
I mean, I can just say, like, we all know where AI is leading us, so I'm happy to have a female leader in that case. No, just kidding. I feel like if we think of voices like that, and being a programmer, one of the first things we learn or should learn, there are ethical issues we need to consider, and there are so many fails we can learn from in the history of computer science and app development and development in general. And I think what we can learn, there should be always an option. And there should be the option of the male voice. There is the option for... I don't think there's a male voice for Alexa right now. But I think that's definitely one thing they should and will consider. And there should be also in games and software development in general, there should be always options for people who don't want to have this specific option. And again, with my thought of the female voice, I feel it's a nice voice, but I also prefer the computer. That's something which is more fun for me. Yeah. And again, it's about options and inclusions. And having more options, it's a matter of having a better way of including more people.
I don't have much experience with Alexa, but when it comes to Siri, I actually think she's cool. Like, she's not submissive. She's like, I could be friends with her. She will tell you what's up, right? She'll tell you what's, I think she's cool. I don't think they position her as someone who is necessarily an assistant. I mean, she's helpful, but yeah, she'll tell you what's up.
I think she's mentioned when things have been ridiculous, right? Or she just won't answer. So that actually wraps up our questions, but these ladies are a wealth of knowledge. So if anyone has any questions for them, we will open it up to the audience now.
Hi, hearing you guys talk, it reminded me of the Toys That Made Us, the Barbie episode. If you haven't watched it, I really recommend it because you really see how the woman behind that had a lot of trouble convincing a bunch of men that it was a good idea to have a female toy, and it was the same. It feels like history repeats itself in different formats, basically. But my question is more regarding female characters in games, because you haven't really talked about that, like female representation in games. So yeah, do you have any words on that, on the current state and where it should go?
Women feel as cold as men, so put clothes on them first. Let's start there. I think it's interesting. So I went to a costume party about a month ago, and the theme was video games. Your favorite video game character. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get a female one, right? How many Lara Croft do you think that was there? Right? So many, or Aloys. And it just got me like, oh, God, there's not really... It was hard. There's not variety. Who am I going to pick? Everyone's going to be the same. I don't want to be the same. And then... I'm not going to say what I dressed after, maybe after the panel, but there were more women with gender-neutral characters as well, like Pac-Man, man. But you understand what I meant, right? Miss Pac-Man, Pac-Man, and things. Miss Pac-Man, or things like the ghosts, or things like there was kind of generic or animals and things like that. But I see the importance of having female characters. I think Overwatch does a fantastic work on characters in general, male, female, diversity, sex orientation, everything. I think they do a fantastic work, and there's a lot of inspiration to take from there. I personally like Lara Croft a lot. It's just because they're I mean, forget the movies, right? But in the game, it's not about love only, right? It's not only about that. And that's, to be honest, yeah, love is cool for everyone, but that's not just the one thing in our lives, I would imagine, right? We all go to work, we all get into complicated situations, so. And the fact that now they started to dress the characters appropriately, and that Lara Croft doesn't need to have such big silicone boobs, it's incredible. And that she gets like torn and she gets dirty, and I saw a lot of reviews about the movie. Let's not talk about if it was good or bad, but I saw someone complaining that it could have been a man playing the role, and that's not Lara Croft. And I was like, why not? It's also about modernizing, right? There's a lot of games or TV shows or books or films that don't hold up because they're so inappropriate. Now, like I was rewatching Friends, and some of the jokes I was like, oh my God, I'm very uncomfortable with this now. And so it's about modernizing also what you're doing. Like the next ones there's going to come, right? You don't need to change what was classic, but what's coming, maybe you need to adapt for the new audience.
Correct me if I'm wrong, is it the new Call of Duty that has a really edgy female character that is like in some full armor kind of, yeah. So I think that it's definitely being addressed, and the reasonings of female animation and complexities and emotions are less hindering than they once were, if they ever were.
First of all, that's going to be a bad joke, but about the city, I think there is a reason why city elects are women. It's first because we're always right, and second, there is an irony that men never listen. So it works both ways. Now, my question was, it confuses me a bit that everybody talks about they don't talk about making games for men, they're making games or making games for women. But when you localize a game, you have to think about culture, religion, background. How can you make a game for women when you're talking about Asian women, Muslim women, South American women? Like, it's so generic. How can it work? Shouldn't it be based on culture, religion, background, independent of gender? Or do we really need to have games for women?
That's a fantastic question. Does anybody want to, because I've been monopolizing?
Very good question. So for us, we have apps that we try to segment based on certain criteria, like what segment of players it would attract. But specifically, we have a Fa Gold product, and it's, again, for females, but it's for Asian females, right? And we have an product manager from an Asian country, from Taiwan, so she kind of brings that into the product, and you can see it in the app. So if you have a chance, download it, and you can see how more Asian it is, and the feature set that they're adding, as well as the content, it would be very Asian specific. So I don't know if that helps, but yeah.
I think there's a caveat to the answer. It depends how niched or how mass appeal you want the game to be, right? You can be very niched and you can direct into Brazilian women, which, to be honest, we are very different from Argentinians and Chileans and Mexicans, and I can say that because I lived in some of those countries, right? But there is this hint of mass appeal, so it depends a lot on what you're trying to do. And at the end of the day, when you're making a game, you want to make a successful game no matter what. There are two ways of adapting this. It's like, oh, I want to make a top 10 chart game. So I'm going to see who's there, and I'm going to see what's good at that, and when I see what I can do better, what they're not doing, right? But what happens when you have games live is that you can actually see who your audience is and then start catering for that. I agree with you. It should be something that is more targeted, but then it depends on how much do you want to achieve and who you're making the game for, because there are differences, right? And that's why there's still this Asian games are different than Western games, and what do you want to do? I think for us, there are, well, the majority, I would assume, I can't, but making games on the West, I think there's more similarities than just a specific there. Like if you look at Japan, China, Korea, they're very different kind of top ones and things like that. So it's not as homogeneous as it is here. Sorry, the big words are challenging.
Fantastic. I have a follow-up question to that, if I may. What genres do most people, or more, I guess, which genres are most popular amongst women players in terms of within the casual genre itself, and then mid-core and so on? Do you see specific genres? Let's say if you were to give the top 5, which ones would be the most popular amongst women players?
Recently, we looked into it, and just some research that I found, it showed that women by category, like #1, brain games, so like games with friends, anything that's game related, brain related. Second is puzzles, and then we didn't care the rest, but those two were the most popular among the women.
Yeah, smart games as well. There's a lot of people playing hyper casual, women playing hyper casual as well. Now it's growing. I think it's all subcategories, or yes, exactly that one, from the casual genre for now. But there's a lot of women that still play, that are playing mid-core and console and shooters and things like that. I think outside the mobile space, Overwatch again is a fantastic example. And just a fun fact, we had some people from Activision Blizzard over giving us some talk about esports, right? And they have this Overwatch League. I don't know if you heard about that. It's a huge deal. There's a lot of money involved, and there are professional teams, and there is one professional female player. And from that, so many more women start playing, right? Because they just needed to see that it's possible. So I think it's growing more and more, and hopefully in the future there's not going to be a difference between genres that we play.
Thank you. This is more to Sabrina because I'm also Brazilian, but I think applies for everybody. But for who doesn't know, Brazil is, well, it's getting better, but it's more a man vision society. So when you started the games, my question is how it was seen from the family, like that you were going to another traditional. I would say that for me, when I said it, it was already hard. So, and I think, I don't know if for every one of you, when you said, oh, I'm choosing a career in games, how was that seen?
Yeah. So I'm going to answer real quick. I was lucky because it was my parents' idea for me to start working with games, but the rest of my family was like, what is that? But you're a girl, don't you want to get married? Which means I did get married, so it doesn't actually exclude if people don't know that, but it was super hard to keep a job, to stay there, and to be hired for the right reasons. But we can chat about that in our own language after this.
Well, thank you all very, very much.
Thank
Christina.
you.
Appreciate it.